Bigweed here. Today we review a pilsner and ask, what sort of dystopian are we living in? 1984 or Brave New World? Well.
Hey,
here we find ourselves here once again.
We find ourselves back at the old bar.
Yes,
there we go.
indeed.
So, what about some beer and conversation?
That's a great idea.
All right.
What are we drinking?
So this is a pilsner, but it's a super doppio.
Oh, super doppio.
Which I had to look that up. Doppio apparently means double in Italian.
Okay, so super duper.
Super duper, and it's imperial pilsner by Dogfish Head.
That sounds fun.
So, yeah, and what a lovely color.
Yeah.
It almost looks gold. Okay, so what are we talking about today?
Well, people have, I think, especially from the time of the lockdown, been talking about, boy, things are getting kind of Orwellian up in here. There's all the surveillance, there's the social credit score type stuff, facial recognition, and all of that. And yes, that's true. But let's not forget there's another vision of dystopia, and it's very different. Yeah. And so where are we?
Okay. All right. Sounds like a good topic. All right.
What is it? So this is Dogfish Head.
Dogfish Head, which is right not too far from us. And it's got
it's a pilsner, so what makes it so super duper?
Well, it says it's an imperial pilsner. One thing that's curious about this is it's brewed with spelt. Spelt is one of these old grains that apparently preceded wheat or something. Yeah. Anyway, it's a different grain.
That's a kooky thing that Dogfish Head would do. This is... Now, before Prohibition, I understand there was a lot of very strong pilsners. And then they started easing America back in by going, okay, so we're going to start off with 3 2s, and so pilsners just stayed pretty light. But this is a 7%, which is not something you see a lot of. Yeah,
that's a reasonably strong beer, and it's got a nice flavor to it. It doesn't taste like a Czech pilsner, like Pilsner Urquell. You don't get that flavor much at all.
No, because there's a kind of a thick finish, which is not characteristic of the crisp pilsner.
And the hops are a little different than I would expect from a Czech pilsner. This is supposed to be in an Italian style.
Yeah. Right. Which I think Italian pilsner means it's dry hop, so you generally don't get a lot of nose from a pils.
Yeah, what's the classic Italian pilsner that you get when you're at an Italian restaurant?
It was begins with a P.
Yeah, Peroni, something like that. Yeah. It doesn't. I don't remember Peroni well enough, but anyway, this is good. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is good.
It's not sharp and clean like a Czech pilsner, but it's still very, very nice.
Yeah, and if blindfolded, I don't know if I would call that a pilsner.
No, I don't think I would. But it's anyway, very tasty, very good. Okay, so 1984 versus Brave New World.
Yes, well let's see. 1984. Let's just do this.
Okay.
Where, I don't know, you want to do any history on it, or you just want to jump right in?
Well, most people know the basic outlines. And by the way, you don't need to have read these books. If they
have 2 different visions. We'll get to that. Yeah. And yes, you don't. You
don't need to read. This isn't shortcut to the classics. You don't need to read the books, although you should. But you don't need to read the books to understand.
To understand the conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, so it was, I think it was published in 49. It was written in 48. I think the 48 is how you get the 84.
Okay.
And then as we're approaching 1984, there was all kinds of buzz about how, Orwellian is it? And, by some standards it probably was, but nothing like it is today.
Well, I guess the question is, where in the world are you? If you're in the United States, it's different than if you're in communist China.
Yeah.
If you're under...
you're full blown.
Yeah, exactly. If you're living under Winnie the Pooh in communist China, then you have a lot of that 1984 going on.
But, still is surveillance, the whole NSA spying.
Right, exactly.
That's the idea of censorship.
Yeah.
And controlling the narrative.
Yes.
I mean, the EU is furious about Elon Musk not censoring people.
That's right.
The guy might have saved free speech and Western civilization, by the way. But.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, we had governments colluding with media to suppress free speech. That's very Orwellian.
Yes.
And
right.
now
what
we've
you can
discovered,
what you can say, you can't criticize the vaccine, you can't suggest that it came from Wuhan lab. Right. This is misinformation, disinformation, to the point where you could be canceled, fired by the state because they needed to control the narrative. So that's very big in 1984. Is the state, the truth of the Ministry of Truth. Yeah. Tells you what's right and what's real.
The New York Times just admitted just a few days ago that they basically fired their science editor for saying something that turns out to have been true.
Right.
And actually not only turns out to have been true, but they knew at the time that they might not have known that it was true, but they knew that it was a reasonable position that, so people will say, well, they weren't sure what, I'm getting off track. But anyway, the point is, we definitely have media and government colluding to misinform and teach us propaganda. So that's very Orwellian.
And deciding what are acceptable and unacceptable opinions. Yeah, that's Orwellian.
That's right.
Now in 1984, the ever-presence of the screen. Well, the screen could look in on you also, but still, just feel like just the ever-presence of screens just gives me that ick.
Well,
even though I know they're not looking backwards.
Well, are they?
As far as I know.
Are they? Because when Zuckerberg testified before Congress, people noticed that he had a little sticker on top of the camera on his laptop. So when you see a tech guy saying, "I better cover up the camera," yeah, because it is possible to hack into a device and view what's going on with the camera. So
And is it possible that your phone is listening to you?
Of course it is.
Of course it is. You signed up for it, as a matter of fact.
Of course it is, because if I say, "Okay, Google," it all of a sudden does something, which means it has to be listening to me. Now, what it's doing with that information is another question. But, okay, so another key element of 1984 is this idea that they would tell us things that are completely false and make us believe things that are false.
Yes.
Yeah. So of course we don't have that today.
No, well, here. So the big scene is Winston Smith, right, is being interrogated and being told that 2 + 2 = 5, right? But you can't just say, "All right, well, I'm going to be in big trouble if I don't say 5, so I'll just say 5."
Yeah.
You have to believe it.
Right.
And so that is trans ideology.
Yeah.
You're right. So if you say, "All right, what's the deal? Bruce is now Caitlin." All right, I call it Caitlin. So what are we doing here? We're all pretending that he's a woman. I don't mind doing that. I'm not here to fight anybody. Is that good?
No, you have to believe it in your soul.
Really?
Yeah.
So what it is, it's become like a fealty test, like a loyalty oath.
Yes.
Like, if I say men can become women, then everybody else knows that I have gone all in, and now I am part of the party machine.
Now, what's that TV show that Walsh recommended that I watched and didn't particularly like?
Severance?
Severance, yeah. So in Severance, there's a scene like that, where if you say or do something that they don't like, they take you into the bad person room, and then they basically brainwash you, and they make you recite this thing over and over again until you convince them that you really believe it. Basically, you're saying, "I'm a bad person. Everything bad is my fault."
Right. So just going along with the program is not good enough.
No.
Right.
You got to keep saying it until you really believe it.
Okay.
That's right.
Totally. 1984.
Yeah.
The state of constantly being at war. I mean, that's kind of...
Well, fortunately, we're not quite there, but there are people who seem to want us to be at war all the time. And
there's a tendency towards... And so, of course, yesterday we were not at war with Eurasia, but today we are. Well, yeah.
That applies to World War II. I remember I was riding back when the days when I was riding the train down to D.C. I used to sit next to this guy, and he was talking about how much trouble it was going to be to try to convince the Americans that we were allied with the Russians. And one of the chief propagandists at the time said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll have Americans calling him Uncle Joe before too long."
Yeah, right.
So this idea that the Soviets are the threat, no, the Soviets are our friends, no, the Soviets are a threat. Exactly. It's funny how those things go. Or same thing with communist China. Mm-hmm. Nixon went to China, and then we had for a long time Bush and other people trying to tell us, oh no, China's a great place and we should trade with them. And so there certainly is this underlying attitude of the government that they think they can just manipulate what we believe and tell us what we're supposed
I wish
to believe.
I could think of the actual incident. I think it was the Washington Post. It's not just Wikipedia, which that happens all the time, mm-hmm. where people just actively rewrite the past. So if you've got something that's inconvenient mm-hmm. from the past, mm-hmm. and then that's the mantra of 1984 is who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls controls the past. So.
And we get this in things like calling Islam a religion of peace, redefining words, calling people undocumented worker, and other kinds of silly things.
We don't say that anymore. I saw today. There are cartoon pictures of children in a fenced-in area, and it says Obama, family detention center. Trump, kids in cages. Right?
Right, yes. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of the way you express something has everything to do with the message, the emotional message that you want to portray.
Right. So the government controlling the language in order to control the message. Yeah.
And then there's things that are also similar to 1984 about the world right now are the state-sponsored periods of rage. Like the BLM riots, and when we had Democratic leaders coming out and saying, well, they need to
blow up a little steam.
They got to blow up a little steam, and it's perfectly understandable. Yeah, and then having state-sponsored efforts to get them out of jail. Kamala Harris was trying to raise money. So there are analogies there. And then there's just this concept of the state of perpetual crisis. Mm-hmm. As long as you're in a crisis, a crisis justifies taking extreme measures, but
which almost always involves removing
civil liberties.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then children as informants. I remember this is a strange story. I'm not sure if I told you this before, but a long time ago, the only day we had to sleep in was Saturday, and we'd sleep in and let the kids go down, and they could watch channel 22 or channel 26 because that was like Sesame Street and that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. So one morning the kids come in and they're like, can we watch TV? And I said, yes, you can watch channel 22. And they go down and they watch channel 22 and they come back up and they say, something weird's on there. Can we watch? I said, try channel 26. They try channel 26 and they come back up and say,
move the rabbit ears around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they come back up and say, there's something weird. And so, it's 7 in the morning. I don't want to wake up. This is my only one day to sleep in. And I think, okay, I got to get up and find out what's going on. I go downstairs and on Saturday morning cartoon time on public television, they're having this show about children reporting their parents for sexual abuse in the home.
Oh, boy.
And I thought, how dare you? Right. Like, what do you think you're doing? Like, my kids don't even know what in the world you're talking about.
Yeah.
And here you're trying to get this into my house because you want to get the kids to inform on their parents about whatever. You know.
Planting ideas in their heads.
Yeah, it was disgusting. And it's very 1984ish that the government runs the school system. So what else?
And the idea that, this bleeds over into the to the other book about the state raising your children.
Yes, exactly.
So that's brilliant. That's a crossover.
That's a crossover. But yeah, it's going to be a bigger and
brave
new world.
This one here is the one that you would have thought could never actually happen. The thought crime.
Oh my goodness!
Which is basically what a hate crime is.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like if you So all right. So you're being charged for assault because you hit that person. What were you thinking when you hit that? Right?
Well, it's bad in America, but it's even worse in England because if you are praying in silence, in your own home, within a certain distance of some other facility, then you can be arrested.
Yeah, yes. The police there are asking them what they were thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, what were you thinking?
Literally asking them, what were you thinking? What were you doing right there?
I was just praying. About what? Well, you know,
it's worse than the Spanish Inquisition. It's crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So, yes. So we also have thought crimes.
Yeah.
So it seems pretty Orwellian around here.
Some things are Orwellian, but you know, other things are pretty Huxleyan.
Huxleyan, indeed. Now, did you want to bring up historically when these were written and under what conditions?
So Orwell wrote after World War II.
Yeah.
And seemed to be reacting to a Soviet-style dictatorship.
Yes, to authoritarianism. So it's very authoritarian.
Yeah. Now, Huxley was writing after World War I, and he was responding more to the way English society had developed after the war.
Yes, I never thought of that book as being modernist, but in that sense, I suppose it was. It was a disappointment in what modernity had brought us, and then our reaction to, the end of the war was, which was horrible. It was the Great War, the war to end all wars.
Yeah.
Was to party like it's 1999.
Well, I think World War I crushed a lot of the Western mythology around the concept of war. World War I, apparently the soldiers went in, they just thought of it like old wars. It was like they went in singing. They thought of
brightly colored uniforms, lots of horses.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was almost like chivalrous. And but they went in with that
cool
attitude.
Uniforms.
Yeah. They went with that attitude, but the reality
and the Germans were like, we're not doing that this time.
The reality was trench warfare, chemical warfare, machine guns, people being mowed down like nothing.
It started on horseback and ended in tanks.
Yes. And the total disregard for life by the people who were in charge. You had people dying in trenches and somebody sitting in a chalet 30 miles away sipping wine, saying, okay, it's time for another charge. But World War I absolutely crushed the concept of the idea that people had about war. So you had, after World War I, you had this reaction against that. And it was like, well, might as well just enjoy life and try to have as much fun and avoid as much pain as I possibly can.
And then you got the Weimar Republic.
Yeah.
And then you had certain elements in Germany who weren't that keen on this level of depravity. And then you got what you got.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a different kind of a problem in Germany, where England had its own problems, but Germany had a different set of problems and went into certain levels of depravity in Germany, and then you had a reaction against that, which gave us Nazis.
So this article that I want to get to later, let me read one little comparison here. This guy says, in 1984, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, they're controlled by inflicting pleasure.
Right.
In short, Orwell feared that what we fear will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we desire will ruin us.
Yes.
So that's pretty good.
That is pretty good. And that's a good contrast between the two visions. Is in 1984, the food is lousy, you have a pretty bad life and you don't want...
you can feel the state staring and controlling you at all times. In
Brave New World, you've got drugs, you've got everything you need. There's like free sex.
Yeah.
There's and also Soma, which is the drug that everybody takes in Brave New World, keeps you basically young and healthy your entire life, and then you just suddenly drop dead. It's exactly what the hedonist would want.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to stay young and healthy and attractive and sexually active and high.
There's no crash. There's no downside.
Right.
Feels good. You still feel fine to get up and be a productive worker the following day.
Yeah, and then like at 102, you just fall over dead. Because that's it.
Sex is everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's also it emphasizes feelings, and says, well, now it's feelings over facts.
Yes.
There's porn and sexuality everywhere, promiscuity, everything is permissible. You know what I mean? You are encouraged to indulge your most base desires.
Yes. And you've been programmed into this from...
Sound familiar at all?
And you've been programmed into this from before you were born. Mm-hmm. They would basically divide people up before they were born into which group they were going to fit in. You need to have some people to pick up the trash, right? So the people who are going to be picking up the trash, they were trained...
Your gammas and betas.
Yeah. So they were trained with, like, auditory stimulus. They would have this stuff repeated to them over and over and over and over again as they were developing.
Right, picking up trash is a satisfying life.
Yes.
Well, of course, you're getting plenty of sex and soma.
Right.
So,
they grew up,
between the three of them,
they grew up believing that. So they would basically fill them with propaganda and train their minds into enjoy. Yeah, and from a certain point of view, that's a pretty kind thing to do. If every society needs to have somebody who goes out and picks up the trash, well, isn't it nice to make it so they actually enjoy picking up the trash?
Yeah. Whistle while they work.
Yeah.
While they pick up the trash.
That's right. Yeah.
But this is the idea of a docile populace. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right?
But they're docile because they're getting everything they want. You've basically trained them to want the things that you can provide.
But I'm talking about, but it's relative to the current where we're living now.
Oh, yeah, right. So nowadays, now the one thing that we're missing is we have the addiction, which is TikTok and social media and all that. So we have people getting this stimulation, but what we don't have is the soma. Now, we're close. We have OxyContin and all that, but we don't...
But before OxyContin, that's a serious addictive problem.
Yeah.
What we have is large numbers of people on antidepressants. Mm-hmm. We're just talking your simple Zoloft and Xanaxes, Adderalls, or we're drugging children.
Yes.
And because any kind of difficulty or discomfort is treated as a problem to be corrected, and the government and the pharmaceutical industry, in hand with the government, this is all very Brave New World.
Yeah.
If you're uncomfortable, this is how we live now. Discomfort means it needs to be addressed, and that even includes. So now we're back to the British cops.
Yeah.
If you have caused someone anxiety, and that could be reading a prayer in public when a Muslim walks by,
right,
and they report you that you caused them to feel anxiety, they will come get you, because no one should have to feel anxiety.
Unless it's the other way.
Yeah.
Unless it's the Muslims praying in the street causing a Christian anxiety, that doesn't count.
No.
But yeah, so that's interesting, because the way we treat things nowadays is, if you have a problem with your stomach, you don't say, oh, maybe you should change what you eat. No, take this drug.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with anxiety, maybe it's not, oh, maybe you should wake up early and do the things that you need to do.
Change your lifestyle and get certain people out of your life.
Take this other drug.
Yes, take this other drug.
Yeah. So we definitely...
that's very Brave New World.
Yes, that is Brave New World. And it's not like everybody gets the same drug, but the idea that we're drugging away discomfort and social unrest and that kind of stuff, that is definitely part of what we're doing today.
Yeah, and that is how we got the opioid crisis. Was, wait a minute, there's pain, and we have pain blockers. Why should a person have to suffer pain when we have pain blockers?
Yes.
Damn the consequences. Well, now we're reaping the consequences.
Yes, and as you mentioned before we started the show, it's very Freudian.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. So, like Freud would say that basically the purpose of life is to maximize pleasure and eliminate pain.
Right. But this is not Freud saying it. This is Freud declaring that is the human condition.
That's what you do. That's
all we've ever done.
Yeah. And he's wrong about that. But you're right. He's saying that's what humans do. They try to maximize their pleasure and minimize their pain. And Brave New World basically institutionalizes that.
Right.
How can we maximize pleasure and minimize pain throughout society in a sustainable, organized way?
Right. And in doing so, we have created the perfect lives. We have we have achieved the goal that we have sought all along. Look at all these people out here. Nobody's upset. Nobody's hungry. Nobody's cold. We're done. We have the pinnacle of civilization.
That's right. As long as they have bread and circuses, they've got their drugs, they've got their sex, they've got, they're attractive, they're healthy, everything is fine.
Right.
Now, what they don't have, a lot of other things, they don't have meaning, they don't have purpose, they don't have...
No, that's never brought up. It's never an issue, and it's never an issue with Freud or the hedonistic worldview. Never addresses meaning, the value of suffering, right?
Right.
All right, let's don't get away from the sex too quickly here, and families.
Yes, families.
So let's look at the postmodernist feminist view of families, the BLM view of families, the socialist view of families.
Yeah.
That really we're better off if they're just raised by the state. And so in Brave New World, that. There are no families. The kids are manufactured somewhere. You're completely divorcing sex from procreation.
It's also the same vision in Logan's Run. Remember how it happened there?
Yeah.
The kids were just put in these places and they were raised by drones, to take care of them. But this idea of getting men and women away from this burden of caring for somebody else, and especially women. The idea that sex results in babies, which results in this burden of having to care for this baby and do all this work. No, that's gone.
Well, that's right. That's really the pill and contraception.
Yeah.
Changed the view of sex, and it changed it to what you see in Brave New World, which is they receive repeated messages reinforcing that sex is purely for pleasure and forming strong attachments is unnatural.
Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting point in Brave New World, is that normally when people have sex, they release various hormones and things which bind them together.
Right.
There's something about it that makes two people fall more in love, get more emotionally attached. What they're doing in Brave New World is saying none of that. It's just recreation. It's like playing tennis. It's like there's no reason why having sex with somebody should result in being emotionally attached to that person.
Yes. It's like OnlyFans or something, right? Where it's just hooking up and pleasure is pleasure. Babies are babies. In fact, you know what? It'd just be better off if the state took care of the baby part, and we'll just separate these two out entirely. I'm feeling kind of Huxlerian.
When I was a fresh young 17-year-old at the University of Maryland, I remember this. I was talking to this guy, and he was saying, "Why should sex be any different than playing tennis?"
Right.
And I remember at the time,
you just show up at the court, pick up a partner, and play.
Yeah. And I remember at the time just laughing like that was the stupidest thing in the world. But it was only later that I started to realize, no, that is actually what a lot of people think. A lot of people, because I thought, what a stupid thing to say. Right. Because I just naturally
associated with emotions and relationships.
Because that's kind of the way a human works. But I later realized that sort of is the modernist agenda, is separating those things.
Yeah. Right now, I would say, if you think about the lockdown, comfort, convenience, and pleasure are our highest aspirations in modern, in the modern world,
and filming ourselves doing something cool.
Right, and very, very brave new world.
Yes,
that's you've taken care of all of the necessities, and now the thing is, we then find out that isn't satisfying. And that's what probably leads to harder drugs and worse drugs. And so that's why in Brave New World they found the soma, which probably alleviates that, that urge and impulse for achievement. And
yeah, so you can almost picture this progression where they're trying to say, okay, we're going to maximize pleasure and we're going to minimize pain. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that everybody can have sex whenever they want without consequences, that they can be high whenever they want without consequences, that everything is going to be nice and lovely. But then they find out, wait a minute, people still have this existential angst. They have this search for meaning.
Dang it, we've taken care of all of the physical stuff, and still people are not happy.
And still people aren't happy. So but that's when they finally figured out just the right drug to make that go away too.
Yes. That's what soma is. It's like weed, but it takes away
right
the existential angst.
Yes, exactly. So if you could imagine somebody who, this is a trope or whatever in modern society, that you have somebody who has everything. They have everything they want, but they still feel empty.
Yeah.
And, okay, so now
and I would guess that more wealthy people commit suicide out of despair than poor people.
Yes. Yes, because
it doesn't make any sense. But what? Go ahead. I mean,
because they have no sense of purpose and meaning, and purpose and meaning are actually more important
because they thought that achieving this thing, where they become the president of the company or whatever, that they've been striving for all the while, or winning an Oscar or whatever, and you're like, dang, what? I thought that was going to be it.
Right. So I heard an interview with this guy who studies happiness, Arthur Brooks. And he was talking about people who have, they want to retire. And you're like, well, what are you going to do in retirement? Oh, I'm going to sit on the beach and drink Mai Tais. And, okay, how long are you going to do that? Okay, you're going to do that for 5 days. Okay, and then you're just going to be so bored
it's not
out of your
last
mind.
A month.
That's right. After 5 days, you're going to be bored out of your mind. So the advantage of soma, the Brave New World thing, you are perfectly happy to sit there on the beach and drink your Mai Tais.
Right. No matter how meaningless your job is, the soma is just going to take that away. Yeah. Plus, you're getting laid.
You have everything you could want.
So, so the topic came up during the playoffs and leading up to the Super Bowl, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, the amount of media time in sports bars, water cooler conversation, 24-hour TV and radio channels. There are channels that are dedicated to nothing but fantasy football.
Right.
There are other channels that are dedicated to nothing but betting on football.
Right.
So I'm thinking, look at the energy and the expense. What if we took the time, the money, the energy, the research, the passion, and put that into how we're being governed? Right? So I was like,
it is bread
my
and
God,
circuses.
I would, yes, I don't know how much the government is behind the bread and circuses,
right?
But I would certainly make sure that professional sports, probably above everything else, plus Las Vegas, gambling is now everywhere. I don't know if there is some nefarious group that's trying to dumb people down into idiocracy so that they don't see what's going on. They don't see what Doge is finding out, because we're all too busy playing Candy Crush and masturbating.
So this is something that I listened to this we both listened to this discussion of 1984 in Brave New World, where the guy said, in Orwell and Huxley's view of the future, there was some sort of central authority that was doing all these things. And this guy was saying, Well, what's different about the modern situation is power has been distributed. That you have this mass number of people who are sort of middle class and they have some disposable money, and they're $5 here and $5 there. If you have 10 million people spending $5, that has an influence, right? So what he's saying is that what's different about the modern world from these two visions is that we have this distributed power. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know.
However, but what's great about that is, yes, maybe Orwell and Huxley both got that thing wrong, but we still ended up in 1984 and Brave New World.
Yes, so that raises another disturbing question.
Yes.
Which is there some sort of underlying drive or push or some mentality that's pushing us in one or other of these directions, whether it's from some group of oligarchs sitting around planning things, or whether it's just like the spirit of the age, that's kind of leading us in that direction.
That's good. What I was thinking was with the Soma and the bread and circuses, that you have the ruling class going, look, you have all of your entertainment. Leave the complicated stuff to us, because we're the experts. That's when I think since lockdown, you've been hearing more and more about, you guys don't need to worry about this stuff. We have experts that can handle that. And so, but that plays into, that is very both a crossover between the two books. Is that there's an elite class that runs things, and everybody else here you're either going to be repressed and shut up, and jailed, or on one hand, or here's your weed, here's your sports, here's your cable, and we're going to, here's your DoorDash. That's what I was saying about comfort, convenience, and pleasure. So now everything is just delivered to your door.
That's right.
It's like straight up idiocracy. You just might as well. Your recliner is also a toilet, so
that's right. You don't have to get up. You can just sit there and stream TV shows on Netflix, order your food from DoorDash, get your weed from the dispensary, and you're set.
And we'll make the big decisions because we have experts on board and we have degrees. They've been to fancy schools.
Yes.
So there's something. How about? So in that. The article,
which everybody should read. You don't have to read 1984 or Brave New World, but look up The Price of Mass Amusement by Andrew Truesdale. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Okay, and Andrew Truesdale, this is an article about an article. So the original article by Mr. Postman, I don't know.
No, it's a book. A book. Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman.
Now this is from, the bygone days, the sentimental era of 1986.
1986.
No, 85. It was 1 year after 84. So this guy is talking about the horrors
of television.
And if this poor guy, apparently he died in 2003, the year before Facebook came out.
Right.
So he missed social media and the pocket smartphone. My God, he would have lost his mind.
He would have lost his mind, absolutely. But he warned us, and we didn't take the warning.
No, so what he was saying, what I was building up to was, he was like, he loved print because there's, it's an active, reading is an active thing that a person does. And it forces the provider to produce something worth holding your attention. And that once TV makes you into just a passive boob, then, the quality isn't important. It's just about feelings. Like we said, feelings over facts. But what he didn't get, but even then, when I was reading, I was thinking, even then, somebody's got to produce the show. Somebody has to determine whether or not it's worth broadcasting. Well, now once you get to the point where you can just make a video of people setting their farts on fire, and post that up and get millions of hits, and that's what the viewer is watching.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Ow My Balls.
All right.
From Idiocracy.
Yeah.
The best show on TV, the highest grossing show on TV is just watching people getting kicked in the nuts. And I'm like, yeah. And this was like in 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
Projected to come 500 years from now. No, it came like 15 years later. We're in full-blown idiocracy.
Yeah, so one thing that was interesting about this article, it's a great article, and you really should read it. It'll be in the show notes. Now, here's a quote. All cultures have tools, but some cultures have moral resources necessary to constrain and direct the uses to which those tools are put. Now, what made me wonder there is, what moral resources do we have today in our society that could restrain smartphones and TikTok? Yeah. Do we have any?
No, it's worse than he imagined. I mean, he saw the problem coming, but he had no idea. He said, because he cared about how people use technology, but especially concerned about how technology changes the people who use it.
Yes.
So, like he was saying about, print, like it must have an effect, especially on children, how your brain is structured. I'm sure there's neuroscience going on.
Yeah.
A child that reads a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it must do something to the way you see the world, I imagine, how your brain functions, as opposed to you spend your whole life just passively receiving whatever comes toward you.
That's right. Yeah, so now one of the things that he pointed out, he was talking about people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Now, when I was thinking about this in the context of everybody jokes around about the fact that these things that we carry around in our pockets are spying on us.
Yeah.
We joke around, ha, 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 this thing's spying on me.
We just don't care.
But, it's just so convenient to be able to, right? And that's the Brave New World aspect of the tyranny that we're under right now, which is, yes, we realize that they're tracking everything we do. Yes, we realize that they're doing all this stuff, but we love it because we get to watch cat videos and hear funny jokes.
And we're willing to trade that for our capacity to think.
Yes. Yeah. What difference does thinking make anyway?
I mean,
who cares? I see those eggheads over there. They think all the time. But are they having fun?
Right. And so in this article within an article, then after sort of summarizing what the original Postman was saying, then he's picking it up going, but imagine, in this brave new world of,
post-meaning?
Post smartphone.
Oh, okay.
And, just anybody can produce any content anywhere seems, in a way, very liberating, right? It's not, we don't have to just appeal to, Hollywood and Madison Avenue are the only people producing content.
It democratizes
Isn't it great?
content.
Democratizes. Yeah, that's probably the word I'm looking for. But he's saying, but then you start to narrow your feed.
Well, amusement, here's a quote from the article. Yeah. Amusement becomes our default mode of engaging with the world.
Yes, I liked the discussion about Sesame Street, which was like, we're going to make learning fun, but he said, which kind of undermines the traditional classroom on the one hand, but at least the end goal was the learning, and we'll feed it to them with the fun, and then the fun became the goal.
Yeah, so what happened was kids thought school was fun as long as it was like Sesame Street.
Yes.
But to the extent that it wasn't like Sesame Street, they didn't like it anymore.
Yeah.
So what happens is you get addicted to this concept of everything has to be fun and enjoyable. And there's nothing fun and enjoyable about learning your times tables.
Yeah.
You just have to sit down and learn your times tables. And
the spoonful of sugar.
Yeah. And that's just not the way the world is. There are times when you have to buckle. Sorry, you have to do these things. They hurt. They're uncomfortable. You don't like them, but you have to do them.
Yeah.
And this whole entertainment-based society erodes your ability to do that.
Yes. When the fun and the entertainment becomes the goal, then you're getting nothing but sugar for your calories.
That's right. Chocolate frosted sugar bombs, I think, is what Calvin always ate in Calvin and Hobbes.
Yes.
He says his mom wouldn't give him the version with marshmallows.
So it produces so in the Brave New while we're in Brave New World, it produces a culture of hedonism and meaninglessness, but without the soma to push down those feelings of meaninglessness.
Yeah. Yeah, so here's another quote from the article that Postman had an optimistic streak. He said, "No medium is excessively dangerous if its users understand what its dangers are." See, I'm not sure I believe that. I think...
Or is there anybody except for Jonathan Haidt and a few others who are pointing out what the actual dangers are?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, okay, yeah, those are the dangers. I understand that. Yes. I don't care.
Well, right, because I'm looking for pleasure and convenience.
Yeah.
And
reputation and other kinds of, the various basic things that people want, and they're getting those things. Okay, so there are some dangers. I'm losing this weird thing called liberty or whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, my ability to focus, my capacity of understanding.
That's right. What's the point of understanding? What good does that do me?
Because I'm getting this constant feed of everything that I already believe, because AI has figured out what that's how Twitter works, right? Yeah. I get some stuff that I disagree with, but not a lot. It's sort of, I guess, based on how does it work? Is it based on my number of hearts and likes and stuff that it starts to just filter out things that I don't want to see?
Tells you the things you want to see, and there you go.
So soon, you're there's no critical thinking. You're just being assured that you're a good person and your feelings are right and you have your truth.
Yeah.
And there is no objective truth. And this is all... Yeah, I'm starting to think it's more Huxlerian.
Yes.
Than it is...
I heard another show where they were talking about the same question, and they kind of came to the conclusion it's like 90% Brave New World and 10% 1984.
Yeah. I go 80-20.
Okay, something like that.
So anyway, wow. So
is there a path out?
Yes, and
okay, no wait.
I always like to. I like to toast on an upbeat, but I'm gonna leave that to you because I can't.
But I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
If you had to live in 1984 or Brave New World, which one would you live in?
I guess Brave New World.
Well, that's the question. Brave New World is obviously more comfortable, but in 1984, at least they're not effing with your mind.
Well, you still get to think.
You're miserable.
You're
miserable, but you still get to think.
But if you get caught thinking the wrong thing, you'll be in trouble.
Yes, then you're going to be in serious
that's a
trouble.
good question.
And it's a horrible question to ask. So, okay, what's the upside? The upside...
Yeah, the upside is I'm not 10 years old growing up in this world.
Yes.
It's almost like upside. God has designed it this way. Like, once the world becomes unrecognizable to you, then you check out. All right, that's my upbeat.
Okay, there we go. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.